Mabuhay, Kustika, welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. It's been a couple of weeks since we got together, and I'm going to do a live stream today. It's called Serious Questions to Gauge Compatibility with Your Filipina Prospect. Last week, we talked about, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about some questions to ask a Filipina online that you just met. And for some people, communicating with Filipina online so far away could be something that is intimidating. And so to help make it easier for you, I thought I would do a series on interviewing, or not necessarily, I wouldn't put it interviewing, just questions to ask to talk to the Filipina to get to know her better. There are questions that you would not ask later because they should have been asked a long time ago, and there are questions that you would want to ask later that absolutely must get asked. There has to be a natural progression of sorts. So I started on time. That's good. I didn't fall asleep and oversleep this time. I ran across some Chuck Norris jokes I thought I would start off with, because I don't know, they've always struck me as kind of funny. Can we volunteer questions in the chat in the Philippines? Absolutely, you can. There may be a question that you thought of that really told you all at once all you needed to know, or maybe it set the direction for other questions to be asked that would be valuable for you. So certainly go ahead and type out the question, and we can talk about it. It's quite possible I didn't ask my wife that, because it seems like most of these questions I never did. Just some Chuck Norris jokes, because my videos tend to be more on the serious side. Chuck Norris threw a grenade and killed 50 people. Then it exploded. Chuck Norris can kill 2 stones with 1 bird. I believe it. Chuck Norris makes onions cry. Chuck Norris knows Victoria's Secret. Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. Chuck Norris beat the sun in a staring contest. Now, you got to be tough to do that. What is Chuck Norris' blood type? It's blood type AK-47. It is considered a great accomplishment to go down Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel. Chuck Norris can go up Niagara Falls in a cardboard box. Now, that's hard to do. When Chuck Norris enters a room, he doesn't turn the lights on, he turns the dark off. Chuck Norris can strangle you with a cordless phone. Death once had a near Chuck Norris experience. I used to watch Chuck Norris shows. It was good. And one here, Chuck Norris was once charged with 3 attempted murders in Boulder County, but the judge quickly dropped the charges because Chuck Norris does not attempt murder. I have a question here. In the Philippines, I think asking how many godchildren they have sometimes reveals a bit. I actually am a godparent, or my wife and I are godparents to a child of a friend of hers in the Philippines. Do you mind saying why you think asking questions about, or a question about how many godchildren they have sometimes reveals a bit? I'm curious, because I'd like to know. So again, most recent live stream talked about questions to ask a Filipino you're just starting to get to know. This time I want to build on that and look ahead to questions a man can ask a Filipina that he's already acquainted himself with. And these will be more serious in nature. If she will engage you in answering questions like these, you'll learn quite a bit more about her and discern better if the two of you would be compatible. And then another live stream in this series will focus on even more probing questions to ask to help you with the big decision. talking about possibly asking questions about how many godchildren they have can tell us about their social circle. My wife's, are you talking maybe religiously? Uh-oh. Are you talking about religiously, where some kind of religious significance there? I'm not sure. It's unusual if a Filipino doesn't have multiple godchildren, it seems. Well, sometimes though I've heard about the godchildren is that it's kind of more nominal than anything else. It doesn't really mean that they're going to be really involved in their life, or it's like their own children. At least that's what I've heard. Hi, James Jensen, crank it up. Do you mean get started or turn up the volume here? I have been playing with the volume a little bit, so I'm not sure. I hope that's good. Just generally, not religiously necessarily. Well, if she said she had 4 godchildren, I would want to know more about that. That may mean there's a lot of people in her life, maybe more so than usual, that you might have to be, helping a little bit too. I'm not sure. So this is Love Beyond the Sea, and my goal is to better equip foreign men to understand, pursue, and have a good relationship leading to marriage with a Filipina. Now, I will list as many of these questions in the description box as I am allowed. There's a limit of 5,000, and I eat 5,000 characters for breakfast, so that can be hard to be limited to. So by going over questions like these, you can feel comfortable asking questions of your Filipina prospect. Even if you are happily married to one right now, it's possible you haven't asked some of these questions and might enjoy knowing her response. So keep in mind, these are questions tailored to a woman you have gotten to know enough to ask her some questions that she might feel are a bit personal, but in a good way. I have deleted some of the questions that you will see in the link because I didn't like them. I got this light here my wife bought. Actually, if I think it looks better in the camera. It's just harder to read. So I'm going to turn that back on, see how it goes. So here's some revealing questions. First one would be, who do you most admire and why? Maybe you asked Filipina this question. You could say, who do you most admire and why? Right off the bat, a question that I don't know the answer to. This will help you understand what she does value about a person. And so you can learn more about her by asking her that question. And most likely, that's a good question to ask, because she's not likely to just answer with a person. She's likely, because it's somebody she admires, to really take off and start talking. And you can just sit back and listen, and you don't have to feel like you're on the spot, having to keep the conversation going with one question after another. James Jensen asks, what's the ideal number, or he proposes asking this question, what's the ideal number of times a couple should call daily? Well, everybody's going to be different based on their personality, the amount of time they have, possibly the hours they work. Some in the United States has 2 great times a day, and personally, I would recommend utilizing that. In the morning here in the States, it's in the evening in the Philippines. And in the evening in the Philippines, it's the morning here. In a couple months, my wife is going to the Philippines to take care of some business with the house we're making over there. It's probably already built, but we plan on talking the same way we did when we were dating online. And actually, she said the best time for her is probably in the evening, because she's going to be running around. So that means in my morning, I'll get a chance to talk to her. The best time, should the ideal number, I don't know, whatever you're comfortable with. Some people think a 10 to 15 minute chat is ample time. Some people like to talk more, are more likely to talk more. It's important to note, if she feels like it's getting to be too long, then I would, back off on that. You could just ask her, hey, do you have time to talk once a day? Because, maybe you do. If you're retired, you could probably talk, 10 hours a day, and she probably wouldn't want that. But that's something to talk about. What would you define as cheating? And that actually comes up in either this video or another one. And that's a real good question, because what we would consider cheating here in America might not be considered cheating in the Philippines. I should put that backwards. What's considered cheating to her in the Philippines might not be at all considered cheating here. Looking at another woman, talking to another woman, having a conversation, online, or having a woman come up and talk to you that you already know, they might consider that cheating and expect there to be no communication and contact whatsoever with somebody else. So absolutely, that's a good question to ask. What are some annoying habits other couples do that irritate you? Okay, keep note of that one. What are some annoying habits other couples do that irritate you? I'm trying to think what my wife would say if I asked her that question. She might say, kiss in public or public display of affection. And if she said that to me right away, I would be a little bit sad, because I would like that. My wife isn't like that. So there's nothing I can do about that except take what I can get. You could ask her, did you enjoy your childhood? I think a lot of these, are the ones I haven't asked. And to be honest, if she says she hated her childhood, I would want to dig into that to see if there's something that she has learned from it, or if it's still bothering her a lot. If she says, she didn't enjoy her childhood, why would that be? Did she move around a lot? Were her parents not good to her? Did she have, things happen? I don't know. The children in the Philippines seem to be very happy, but that's definitely a good question to ask. Maybe ask her where she would holiday or travel. A Filipina perhaps hasn't traveled much and may not know where she would go, or she might have a bunch of ideas and it'd be a fantasy for her to holiday or travel. It all kind of depends where she's from. You would probably get a lot of answers. I don't know. I was just thinking, if her answers are really bold, that might make you feel a certain way. If they're more realistic, then where she would like to travel or do a holiday at, she might say something that makes you feel more comfortable. How do you vent your frustrations in a relationship? Believe it or not, a lot of the Filipinas, even if they're very beautiful, have not had many relationships. And that's a good one, because, well, that's if she's honest and tells you. I know some people would say, oh, we just talk it out or something like that. But then in real life, they get emotional and angry. I mean, I know if somebody had asked me that, I just have to say, look, I haven't had one for a long time, and for them it might be click and see you later. But fortunately, with my wife, she was okay with that. She seemed to understand. In an argument, probably gonna ask, whose side would you choose? Might be depending on the topic of the argument there. A twit in the Philippines, my least favorite question that a Filipino would ask me was, why are you single? And that's a question that I was asked many times before I was married, and I didn't know how to answer them. If she does ask you, and my wife has actually brought it up more than anyone else, I just tell her, well, hon, I don't have a good answer for you. I just don't. I mean, I say, you think I make a good husband to you? Well, maybe I could have made a good husband to somebody else, but I just don't think I had the opportunity. And that may sound like an excuse, but what can you say? Just be honest. I mean, if you were in prison for the last 20 years, then you say you were in prison for the last 20 years. If you can say, well, my standards, I don't think they're too high, but apparently I just can't find anybody that I match up with. Just don't be defensive. If somebody asks you that, and that's from her side of things, that's a good question. Well, you seem like a nice guy. Why are you single? I would tend to avoid trying to rip into women from your country, even if you feel like they're not giving you a chance, because then you're kind of changing the topic from circumstances in your life to something else, American women, for example. So if you have to say, I'm just really not sure, I think I would make a good husband. The women I talk to here, they say no, they're already married, or they already have a boyfriend. I don't know if they do or not, but I've tried. I'm not going to just ask anybody out. I want to have some standards, and apparently the standards I have, they just don't match up with anybody that's available. You could certainly say that. So yeah, I wasn't crazy about that one either. Take me or your mothers. You might have to expand on that one. James Jensen. In the Philippines, it's hard to answer and feels embarrassing for me. It is hard. You might hem and haw over that because you don't usually expect that. One time, many years ago, I went to somebody's house for Thanksgiving and opened the door, and there I am in a big family, and this little girl says, are you married? And I say, no. And of course, her mother says, shh, don't do that. And then she says, why? So even there, I got put in the spot by a little child. James, if you're asking, who do you take, me or your mother's side or family side in arguments, I'd like to think she would choose you. And actually, my wife did say after she got here that if there is a problem or disagreement, something to be worked out between the foreigner and the Filipina, that most of the time, she said, the Filipina's family is going to side with the foreigner. Now, who she would side with, you like to think she would also side with you. But again, it may simply come down to what is in view there. You could ask, if you had $1 million to give to a charity, which charity would the money go to? So this would reveal what she has a heart for, and hopefully she wouldn't say, well, I'll just keep it all for myself, or do something crazy with it. Hopefully her answer would give you a little bit of insight into her values. You could ask her what makes you angry. Hopefully she doesn't say everything or a lot of things. And this is important because if there are petty things, that would be a major red flag to me. Then I would politely ask her, why does that make you angry? But yeah, people in a relationship, even if they love each other dearly, are going to be angry. And I think they should bring it up and talk about it. It would be helpful to know first. Maybe she says, she'll describe something like what makes her angry is the husband doing this or not doing that, or her boyfriends. And if you feel like that's just not realistic and you're just going to marry somebody that's going to be angry with you, and you would want to go the other way. So that's a very fair question. James Jensen, if you're having a bad day, would you want me to leave you alone or spend time with you trying to cheer you up? You must have already read my material, James, because that does come up somewhere along the line. So if it is, I want to get to it and read what I would say. But that's good. Would you want me to leave you alone or spend time with you to cheer you up? If she says she would like you to leave her alone, that might be better than saying, oh, she wants you to spend time with her trying to cheer her up, because we tend to say, cheer up with logic. Well, all you have to do is this. Don't worry about it. Here's what I would do. And that's not exactly what she means by cheering her up. But certainly that is a fair question. Would you ever say sorry even if it wasn't your fault? James Jensen. Well, that's kind of again, these are questions that are a little bit more serious than the last time. We're just trying to get to know each other. Even if it wasn't your fault, boy, that would be tough. That would be hard. I'm 57 years old. I'm not sure I would honestly say, yeah, I'll just take the blow for that one. That would be hard, for a lot of people, I think. A twit in the Philippines. Another question. The charity question is good. It's like when people ask each other what they would do with a big lottery win, and it's true. If she says, well, I know all these people that are poor in my hometown and I want to help them. I want to help build schools for children or better wages for teachers. Boy, that's you want to put a check mark by that person, I think, and make sure if you're communicating with others, that you at least get back to her. That would be, what I would want to hear. You could ask her, what do you need to feel fulfilled in life? What do you need to feel fulfilled in life? Is this, what she says, is that realistic? Is it of a materialistic nature? This kind of question can be a good indicator of continuing the relationship or not. If she needs certain things to be fulfilled in life, and it is to a monetary, physical, spiritual, or emotional degree that you can't do, then you would want to know before. How do you feel? Philippine Reality. Hi, Philippine Reality. Welcome to this a live stream about questions to get to know a Filipina. I want to make it easy here. I'll have a list of these questions. Pick off these questions that are coming in the comments section whether you're married or still looking for a Filipina, because these are good questions. You don't normally just sit around the sofa or the TV and ask these kind of questions. So that's good. How do you feel about Filipinas who, while married to an American and living in the United States, employed, spends most of their time at work, putting in all the overtime humanly possible? So I assume this might be a question for me. How do you feel about Filipinos who, while married to an American, live in the USA, employed, spend most of their time at work, putting in all overtime humanly possible? Well, if that's a question that I would have to respond to, yeah, that's a valid one, because Filipinos are hard workers. My wife said the same thing. Well, I can only work 60-hour weeks here, and if I need to, I'll just get another job. And then I have to say, well, I didn't marry you to go back to feeling like I was single. I married you to be with you. I want you to work. I want you to help your family. I know that's just how it's always been with her and others, but we got to be realistic here, because I need you around some. And, I didn't marry you just to give you an opportunity to help back home. And hopefully she's realistic about how much overtime she works. And I know Filipinas overseas do that. They will work their fingers to the bone sometimes, and you got to protect her and tell her you care about her, and you just don't want that to happen to her. Then when a Filipina gets home, finally she turns on her Skype and spends her time at home talking to her families. Okay, yeah, Philippine reality. Well, then you're talking about potentially two extremes. One is working to exhaustion, and then two, finding a way to smooth that over, or to counter it with a lot of time on social media. And while the work is great, the overtime and social media should be allowed because of her circumstances being so far away. I mean, this is where you need to fashion some questions to talk about this before you're going to ask her to marry you, because who knows, she might be very well likely to do this when she gets here. So no. How would you deal with that beforehand? You would say, well, you probably want to work here when you get here. I want to help you find a job. I'm going to do that. But I'll try to help as much as possible, whatever I can do. I'm not going to disallow you to send money back home, but I do want to spend a lot of time with you. I'm single. I want to get married for a reason. I need your company. I want to enjoy life with you. You can work, but look, we need to spend time with each other. I don't know. It's kind of uncomfortable to talk about these things beforehand. Maybe it's better that you wait and see if it happens here, and if it does, then hopefully you work on that immediately. She comes here immediately. You spend one day where she works too long or spends too much time, and then you just have to kind of gently say, well, hon, how much time do you plan on spending a day on social media? You could ask her, if you were to immigrate here, how much time are you going to be spending on social media here compared to how much you do in the Philippines? Something like that, because you'll want her to know, I'm not going to forbid you from using it, but we have to be realistic too. If that's something that's happening out there in the real world, then it should be talked about before you get married. That would be a difficult situation requiring a lot of patience, and I'd like to think that just wouldn't be very likely to happen unless they got married very, very quickly and weren't a really good match. If they were a good match for each other and got married quickly, that would be easier to work through, probably, to a resolution. Then when she finally earns time off, she jumps on a plane and heads to the Philippines without her husband. Well, I hope that did not happen to you. And if it did, I'm very sorry to hear that. And yes, that has happened. And hopefully that person learns from that, and maybe we'll ask different questions about getting to know them, look for different signs. There's ways. We're not going to talk about red flags tonight, but there's things you can do. I mean, getting other people's opinions or insights, because you might have a blind spot, is important. And that kind of all depends on what goes around or what goes on during their time before they get married. But that would be a terrible situation if that happened. James Jensen, what's the one thing about me you would like to change? I don't even think that's exactly on my list. She would have to know you better. That might be better asked later on, like in the next live stream. You don't want to ask it after you're married, but that's something to ask at some point. Maybe not, kind of in the middle of where things are, because she doesn't know you well enough. If you want an honest answer to that honest question, if it is an honest question, she wouldn't know you well enough to really say. And the thing about a very long distance relationship, there's kind of a limit to just how well she can really know you anyway, I think, before you get married. But you should ask that question. She might say, well, I don't like your facial hair, well, I don't like your clothes, or something along those lines, which, maybe is something you can do something about. Philippine reality, do you truly believe we as foreigners ever come first over family? And the answer from my vantage point would be that the Filipinas family is the reason that she immigrated. And so the one thing you should understand right away, a foreigner interested in Filipina, is because of those dynamics of poverty. And I've been there 3 times. The first time left me speechless. The effect kind of wore off the second and third time there, but it's around you, and then you get back to your country, and it's like, wow, how do they do that? So you can get a great wife from the Philippines, but she is, and this was advice given to me before I got my wife here from somebody that immigrated from Ethiopia. He said, Bob, you got to understand this. She loves you. She can be a good wife, but her number one, not only, but her number one priority is to take care of her family. And if you can look at that truth or reality or fact or dynamic without taking it personally and just maybe put yourself in her spot, I couldn't do what she's doing anyway, leave everybody to come to another country. But if I did, I would probably say, if I was, the woman, I'd probably say, look, my family's important to me. I want to be the best wife I can be, but I've got to take care of them. That's just, you're important to me, but I don't want to evaluate or pit the two side by side. But my family's important to me, and that's why I'm coming here. I married you because I think you would make a good husband to me. I'm coming here to work overseas, live overseas with you because of my family. It's an obligation. It is. I'm sure people have done videos on that, and if not, they should. If you read a lot of comments from Filipinas, and they'll say it's more or less an obligation. They really can't say no. So that's the way she feels. It's her perspective. Not that she doesn't love her husband. It's not that she's going to make him a priority or be important in his life, but she absolutely must. She has no choice. She must put her family first in that sense. And it's just ingrained. And, if push comes to shove, my wife might say the same thing. But I know that she is a fantastic wife. She's met my needs. She is a good wife. Does she put her family first? Well, she never says it. I can maybe infer from time and looking at things that that's her number one priority. I don't mind. It doesn't bother me at all. Now, if she's like that, the first question or an earlier question where she works laboriously 50, 60 hours a week, and then comes home and instead of being a wife is on social media. Well, I think by her actions, she's saying that she has a big gap between her family and her husband. But ideally, you shouldn't see a big chasm like that. You're going to see her wanting to help her family financially because they're the only way they're going to get it. I mean, they can work to some degree, but they don't have the means that we have. But if you can still see through that to the other side where she's still being a wife and a good wife, and if you have some needs that aren't being met, just talk to her about that. Just say this, I want you to help your family, but I feel sometimes you're spending a little bit too much time at that. Can you kind of change that around a little bit? Just something like that. But my opinion would be that in her mind, she wants to get married, be a good wife, have all the things that she can't get in the Philippines, but she is there with you in her case to help her family. Now, that initially that will probably bother you, and that's understandable, but you can't make that all or nothing. That's just big part of the reason why she's coming here. And you just have to see that from her unique, compared to what we see here, her unique perspective. And if I'm not answering your question satisfactorily, just please ask again or say some more, because that is very important. I have mentioned it from time to time in my videos. If people listen long enough to hear that, they've heard me say that. Yeah, and thank you. I'm happy to ask that question. I'm glad you had the nerve to ask it, Philippine reality, because I want people to learn about the truth. And if she comes here, has no signs of being the type of woman you thought you were communicating with online, well, that may not end well. But I don't see you having a good relationship online once you've asked questions and you come to the point that, what, I think I want to slip a ring on this woman's finger. I don't think you're going to likely see her come over to your country and then do a complete about face and not spend time with you. I don't think that is likely to happen. I think you can work out a few signs from their behavior in the Philippines. They're like their life and work balance. Sure, you can. It's probably better that they are working. If they're not working at all, you don't know if it's because they're not interested in it. You know, they're looking for a meal ticket, or maybe they just don't have an opportunity, or maybe they don't have a college degree, and that's very important in the Philippines. But yeah, if she's working, has a job at Jollibee or somewhere, and every penny goes to herself, that tells you something. Or anywhere else. I mentioned Jollibee because, well, it's a popular place. You think of the Philippines, you think of Jollibee, or anywhere else. Um, you know, you just have to, but that is true. And ask her about her work, ask her about a typical day. Does she feel like she's overworking? You could even ask her, hey, I know you want to help your family. I understand that, but do you ever feel like it's unfair or something like that? That might be a good question to ask her. In the Philippines, they usually ask them a slightly complicated question in English to assess their English level, and that's true. You can gain understanding. Also, the past tense, present tense, and so on can be confusing, and some of the words we use, or expressions they probably haven't even heard of before. So hopefully she has good English, and hopefully you talk well enough to know that she is actually comprehending what you're saying. So thank you. Language is quite the barrier. It can be. The younger women in their 20s, probably 30s, their English is normally pretty good. Not so much for their parents. In the Philippines, they often can learn English, but they don't go home and talk in English because they're so used to talking in Tagalog, Bisaya, or something like that. But she's going to be communicating if she comes here with other people who speak English, and she's going to be more comfortable if her English is good. So that's something to look at is the way she speaks English and understands it too. So Bob, did you just admit your wife married you to further her number one priority, her financial gains for her family? She didn't marry me I didn't just admit that. One of the things a Filipina, if she could, but that's not necessarily realistic. If she didn't have to go and leave everything and everyone she's ever known, she wouldn't. A foreigner, if he could marry somebody, without having to spend thousands of dollars in travel and visa fees, wouldn't. If he could get what in the United States he could get in the Philippines, he wouldn't do it. And probably in a similar way, you can say that about a Filipina. So that doesn't mean that I'm saying it's a business transaction. She is looking to help her family. Now, if she takes every penny you have and it's going to the family, well, that's not a good thing. But her number one priority is her family. Now, financial gain is one thing, meeting needs is another. She's not trying to make them rich. She just wants them to be, secure. If you're Filipina is coming from a poor family, poor background, I think you'll have compassion. You want to help her and understand from her perspective, this is why she's marrying a foreigner, without taking it personally. And maybe that's a topic of another video to do. But no, you shouldn't take it personally. Unless you want to live alone the rest of your life. I would rather marry a Filipina who can be the best wife I could ever find, and a real good one, and know that she is going to be working to help her family. She's not asking me to do all of those things. She's my wife. I'm proud of her. She wants to help her family. In her situation, that's not going to happen if she stays in the Philippines. Not all Filipinas do that. They're scared of what could happen to her. You have to be brave. I don't personally have a problem with her. Now, if she says, Well, no, I don't love you. I never did. I never will. I'm only here to, if she's that brazen, well, you want to find out, before she gets here. Um, but you should assume, and look, if this is something that you find offensive, or that's one extreme, or a little bit of a blow to the ego, it's something to just step back and look at things from her situation. Does not mean she won't be a great wife, but she could get married somewhere else and not risk going somewhere and getting beaten by the foreigner, and so on. But she does, because she can't give her family those opportunities. So you know um, I've been married to my wife for over 3.5 years, so I know what I'm getting from it, and I know what she's getting from it, and how her family's benefiting, and that works well for us. I believe we are all used for a Filipinas family's gain. Well, the used or utilized, you know, that can mean two different things. Are you being utilized? Is she? You can look at taking advantage of in two different ways too. Is she taking advantage of you? Um, she's taking advantage of an opportunity that she has because of her situation, and that is to be a good wife to somebody far, far away. She's leaving her family. She's not being with them, her friends. That's hard. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't even do it. I don't have that in me. But she's doing that because the foreigner can give her a better life. And most people would prefer to have a better life. If you can, get a 10 times your salary somewhere else, but you say, no, I'd rather just live here in this slum or this hood. um, you know, you're going to take advantage of your opportunities. You're going to say, well, how can I do better? Um, it doesn't mean you hate the place you live or there's something wrong with it. You just see better opportunity somewhere else. So I'm trying to think how to better say that. Use is too strong. Utilizing, what woman doesn't want to utilize what she can gain from her husband? And I don't say that in a negative MGTOW type of way. I think that's just part of the way we are designed, just the way we are. Um, James, may I ask you about how many previous sex partners you have had? Well, I'll say, because my wife knows. Do I want to say it here? All I will say is that yes, there were others, and she didn't ask me about this, and I didn't ask her about it either. Um, but yeah, that's something that we're going to cover a little bit later here, I think, because if it's in your mind, if it's something that's eating away at you that you got to know about her, then I think you need to talk about it. Is there a stereotype among Filipinos that foreigners beat Filipinas? Absolutely, because it happens. Um, when my wife, before she came here, she went to this conference for Filipinos overseas, and they will talk to her about what to do if your husband beats you, um, because they're trying to get them prepared for what could happen. And they're not going to just pull things out of thin air to make foreigners look bad. This happens. And so from their vantage point, and they can't even leave the Philippines to immigrate without that sticker. So she has to go and she has to hear that. From your point of view, it can be kind of unnerving, but they do that because it happens. My wife, her friends asked her, do you think he's going to beat you? Then when we went back the first time together, they asked her, not in front of me, of course, is he beating you? Does he ever beat you? That is a concern. Stereotype? No, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a stereotype. It's a reality that it must happen enough that they are concerned about it. I mean, you've got a older, bigger, maybe more powerful in a sense foreigner, smaller Filipina, Maybe she's educated, maybe she's not, but she's been poor, and some guys may try to dominate her in some way, and evidently it happens. So to them, it's a valid concern, and so it is. Stereotype, not that strong though, but it does happen. James, should secrets in past relationships stay secret? That depends on the secret. I think there should be as much openness as possible. Let's say you got, or either one of you, let's say you have a sexually transmitted disease. Well, that should not stay a secret. If there any kind of behavior in the past with relationships could be potentially injurious to your relationship, then you have a right, since you're not married yet, to ask anything you want. And it's harder to find out things about a Filipina because she's thousands of miles away. So again, pretty much everything is fair game. Sometimes you just have to know how to ask the question in a way that doesn't turn her off, so that she answers it. And one more here, it's because foreigners have a stereotype that Filipinos beat Filipinas and drink a lot. Well, then if it's a stereotype, then that, so be it. Stereotypes aren't necessarily always true. They're just there for a reason. Sometimes people overinflate how often they happen. I have only heard that, from my wife, and from knowing that she's what they're told in the Center for Filipinos overseas. Where to get help, where to escape for shelter. If that happens to you. Back to the list of these questions here. I appreciate these questions. Everybody can learn from them, I do believe. Do you think people are more influenced by their environment or by their biological traits? It's okay if she says a question is difficult to answer, and this one might be. It doesn't mean she isn't smart. It doesn't mean that she's hiding something. Some questions take longer to think about. However she responds, I would want to hear an answer that accepts responsibility for her actions. If I asked this question, if she said people aren't necessarily responsible for how they are or what they do because of certain factors, I would want to find out more. That's the way I would take that question, but perhaps I'm reading too much into it. My question was, it okay to ask her about her previous sex life? Yeah. Hopefully she'll say, she doesn't have one, but if that's important to you, and then I can see why it would be, then I would ask her that. If she says, well, no, I'm not going to answer that question, it's too private, well, make up your own mind where to go from there. And if it were me, I would assume that she's hiding something. So, and if she's honest with you, or she hasn't had any, those are things you want to know too. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, twit in the Philippines. You want to know as much as you can about what you can control with this person. You're at a safe distance. You have decisions don't have to be made in the context of your communication. You can always just make some mental notes about some things she said, and maybe go back and ask her again. The bottom line is, at this stage, maybe you've eliminated some Filipinas, and now you're getting a little more serious about the ones that are left on your list. And so you should be able to ask her anything that you can. Would you ask her and explain a prenuptial agreement? Yeah, why not? I'm sure they've heard of prenuptial agreements. We don't have one ourselves, but if I don't know, I would just ask her. I don't know how my wife would have. Well, she didn't want one, and we don't have one. She didn't. We're married in the Philippines. That's good. The divorce is a lot harder there, and that's the way I wanted it. If you have concerns about a prenuptial agreement, you should be able to bring up any concerns you have. You won't know how she responds until you ask her. But the getting to know you stage is more than just seeing how they react in difficult situations. It's discerning if this person, is somebody worth investing in. So we don't have one. We didn't pursue that. But nothing is stopping you from doing that. See what she says. Have you heard it before? Amy Wilson, thank you. I'm not sure what you mean by have you heard it before. I'm going to look at another question here. Please expound on that, clarify it so I can respond to it. You could ask her, what do you think your purpose is? If she's young, she might not even know or have thought about it, but many people might say they don't know. So is this question realistic? I don't know, but she might blow you away and have a very mature answer to that question. We got to clear some things out here. How much information do you provide to them about yourself? A twit in the Philippines asks. Well, I think I would answer that by as much as, of course, I think she needs to know without, keeping anything from her. I mean, this is where kind of things get tense. You might be thinking to yourself, well, I think she ought to know this, but don't really want her to know it. Maybe we don't have to talk about it when we're married, but maybe it's better to find out now, whatever it is. Maybe there's something about your past, and if so you don't have to provide everything. You don't have to provide everything, but or put forth everything or offer everything about yourself, unless you're comfortable. If she asks you something, then I think that's different, and I think she's owed an answer. And I don't know if you have a particular thing in mind that might scare her off, but there are things I've said before. You never know everything until you're married anyway. There's some things you're just not going to learn anyway until you're together. But this is a fair question, albeit a difficult one, of me anyway. How much information do you provide to them about yourself? I would say whatever they want to know. But without knowing just how serious these questions are, that's about all I would say at this time. On the other hand, if you think there's something that she better know, and you're thinking, well, if she knows this about me and I tell her and she responds in a good way, then I've just made a great discovery. That's better than not saying something that you think she might want to know and then having a bite you in the butt later. Real name. Real name. Well, I'm trying to think how I would respond to this because of a situation I'm already aware of. I mean, let's say the guy is loaded. He's got a lot of money. That's not something I would want her to know for a while. And if you give her your real name, and let's say you have a lot of money, then she could kind of be skewed by that. Maybe she wouldn't really make you a good wife, but she knows that you got lots of money because it's clear that she could do a simple search, Facebook search or something like that. Or if you're thinking maybe there's something in your background that she would want to check that you don't want her to know, then you kind of have to go back to what I said before. If it's something that she might find out and might wonder why you didn't talk to her about it, that would be a bad thing. It depends on what we're talking about here. I just don't know if we're talking about affairs or having killed someone or or spent time in prison. But whatever it is, you know, you should talk about those things. I would personally want to know her name just because I would expect to hear her name. I don't know why she would want to hide it. I've never even thought about that. I know a girlfriend I had that would fall in line with the question that James asked me a while back, did not tell me her first name. She never told anybody her first name. She always gave them a made-up name, and then she would reveal to them her real name. And I don't know, she was attractive. She probably didn't want everybody bugging her. Maybe she thought she could, you know, outrun the posse a little bit if they didn't know what her real name was. I would personally give her my name. I don't have any, she's not going to find out anything about me. And if there is, then, you know, that's something that would have to be addressed, hopefully sooner rather than later. James Jensen, would you start a small argument just to see how she responded? Well, that brings to mind a video that I have done. I think I've uploaded it. I have not released it, and maybe I should now, James. Here's one time when I'm one step ahead of you, and it's going to be called, Should You Ever Test a Filipina? Should you ever test a Filipina? So this is a little test to see how she responds. I'm not going to be dogmatic or legalistic and say never, because you clarified this with a small argument. I might be more accepting of that if that's the only time you do it. The reason I made this video that I haven't released yet is because I know people will say, well, start with the test here and then kind of increase the test a little bit here and then kind of keep testing. I don't know, that if that were me, I would just say, well, you don't trust me, you know, what's the point in continuing this? So if it's a small argument, then that might be all right, James. It just kind of depends on how she takes it. She may take it in a big way. You know, every woman, she could shrug it off, or it might really bother her. That would depend on her, but at least, you know, you would find out, wouldn't you, by doing that? I'm not on Facebook. Some Filipinos seem to think this is odd and say that this makes me less trustworthy. Well, I know if you told her, well, look, a lot of guys my age, you know, aren't on Facebook, that would probably be true, except there's a lot of guys your age that probably are, and maybe more so than there were 5 years ago. But I think it's still true. A lot of older guys, they just don't care about Facebook. If you're not on Facebook and it's because you don't see the point in it, just tell her, you know, I'm not on Facebook because I'm hiding anything from anybody. I just don't enjoy it. I don't want to spend the time. I don't want, you know, everybody knowing things about me. I'm kind of private. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't make a good husband to her, because the one that needs to know about you is her, not everybody on Facebook that can get information and, you know, construe it or share it all over the world. You know, that's okay. I'm only on Facebook kind of because I had to try to communicate with someone, and I don't really use it, but I didn't even make it. You know, my wife made it for me. I haven't done much with it though. Another question here, and I appreciate these questions and comments. Who is the villain in your life? Who is the villain in your life? I only list this one to say that you should think about any question beforehand to decide if it would pay off. I personally don't like this particular question because it's kind of negative, and I know it just rubs me the wrong way. There must be a villain in your life, so tell me who it is. Then the conversation turns kind of negative. If you're talking about, well, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, you know, that's a little bit different way of saying the same thing, perhaps. You don't always have time to think about your questions. That's why we we do these live streams, and you can print those off. I think these, I'll put them in the description box, and you can have them for yourself and maybe help ask your own questions from that. And we're getting some really good comments here. I appreciate that. Do you track social media use of your chatmates? I mean, before I was married, I didn't know anything about social media. I knew about Viber and Skype because I had to, in order to communicate with her. I didn't even have a webcam, so I got that. Got Skype in there. She helped me use it, but I never had the thought, because I was busy. There were 4 other women before her, and I was, I dropped them to spend time with her, and we talked an awful lot. And I don't think I would have. I mean, if I knew how, who knows? Maybe I would have. But I'd like to think I'd have to have a good reason before I would kind of look over her shoulder and see what she's doing. As far as now that I'm married, I do. We don't hide anything from each other. Sometimes, I mean, I can see access to all her stuff, and she can have access to all my things, and that's good. I like it that way. Just this morning, before my wife went to work, I saw one where I could understand some of the words, and it sounded like somebody was in a bad spot, very bad position. And so I asked my wife, what's going on with this friend of yours? Is she okay? And she told me what was going on, and it was a very sad thing. But we don't hide anything in ours. And if you feel the need to look over your shoulder, that's fine. If she finds out you've been spying on her, that might not be a good thing. But again, you're far away. You've got a big investment to make. If you're trying to do these things to come to a point of trust, that's probably acceptable. Hopefully not. It's just because you have a hard time trusting people in general. If you have a reason to, most certainly. Sometimes my wife and I have done that for some other people. When she said, "Boy, that sounds fishy" or something, then we'll go doing a little investigating. But that's, and if something's up, we'll tell them, although it's never been bad. James Jensen, would you ask her how her family really feels about white guys, and are they distrusting you chatting me? I would ask her that. I don't know why not. I mean, I know racism. We're so sensitive to racist comments here. I just don't have a problem with most questions if they're asked properly and with the right intent, because you have to know. Now, if you ask this question and you're wondering, well, maybe her parents don't think she should be talking to me. Maybe they don't trust foreigners. They just think I'm gonna, abuse her or something. What does it hurt? What does it hurt to ask her that question? Phil's to Phoenix. Hi, John. How are you? You're missing some good questions here. They're really putting me on the spot. I don't know here, but I don't want to have a channel where it's not realistic, because I don't want anybody to just marry a Filipina because they have a good reputation. You have to discern which Filipina you're going to marry one way or another. The focus tonight is on questions. So if I find my place here again, you could ask her, what words do you think people use to describe you? What words do you think people use to describe you? Notice it isn't what words do you use to describe yourself. Different angle here. What words do you think people use to describe you? You could ask her, what words do you want people to use to describe you? What words do you want people to use to describe you? Again, not focusing on one's impression of themselves. Very tricky something that James Jensen would do, because he's very good with his questions, and I learn a lot from his questions, when I go about answering them. I think you had about 19 chat mates at one point. Very tiring keeping in touch with all of them, a twit in the Philippines. But you're very popular and very busy. I had my handfuls with 5, because I was always making notes. I'd get out these yellow pads here, and sometimes had more than one, and I would just jot down people's names and notes and things they told me. And wow, 19, that's juggling a lot of balls, and I think I'd be dropping most of them. And that's part of the reason I decided to focus on Isa, was because it was beginning to be overwhelming. I took 2 days off work just so I could try to, keep my head above water. And yeah, that's really hard. And hopefully, questions like this, I don't know what you've asked in the past, but hopefully we can learn from questions like this if we're still attempting to marry a Filipina, so that we don't have to spend time with 19 at once. That would be hard if you never worked. If you had all the time, that would still be difficult. You want to try to narrow your list down as reasonably as possible, and by asking good questions. The first time, you're just kind of seeing if there's maybe a little bit of chemistry, and if there's you understand each other, comprehension of the language and so on. But at some point, you have to do more than that, and you have to roll up your sleeves a little bit and ask some more difficult questions. How long would you suggest spending time in person with her for the first time? I have a dilemma, as I am interested in meeting someone in Cebu, but I don't want to hang around in Cebu unnecessarily. Spending time in person with her the first time. Well, are you talking about how many days or weeks to spend there, which means you'll be seeing her a lot? Or are you talking about generally the first time you get to see her? You're probably talking about like a vacation or something. How many days? Well, if you don't have a lot of days, then you'd want those few days that you have, or a week or something, to count. If you can afford to go back multiple times, then you can afford to keep it lighter, longer, before getting more serious. Spending time with a person is good, though, because you get to see how she reacts. Just how she dresses, how she responds to people. Is she polite? Our situation was different because I was going there to meet her parents and get married. If you're going to see, some of those 19 women, and see 3 or 4 of them, then you'd have to each give them a piece of the pie. And for days, it just depends. I mean, some guys could go out and say, I'm coming back with a wife, or I'm not coming back until, I'm pretty sure. It all depends what you know about her before you even go see her, what you learn about her in that time. That's just a personal thing. If it were me and I'm spending all that money and surviving the plane flights and all that, I'd want to spend as much time as I possibly could personally. But if you don't hang around Cebu necessarily, then I don't know. I hope that helps a little bit, because there's your opportunity to see how she really is, at least more so than she would be behind a camera. And if you spend a little bit more time with her there, a few more days, that could change your opinion too. It just all depends. Phil's to Phoenix, the marriage ministry gave me a good list of 100 questions for building a relationship they use in their premarital classes. And this is important. I mean, I'm just trying to do my part to help people have some reasonable questions they can ask at different stages, and all appropriate, at the same time. And we should learn from this. We should learn from asking questions, because it's harder to do when you're so far away. You can have different work, sleep schedules, so you need to make your questions count. And I'm glad you had that list. And those marriage counseling questions, they would probably, or marriage ministry, I'm sorry, would probably be more in line with questions that I would do in another live stream about one where you're going to pull the trigger. Maybe you just got to be real sure, or even after you're married, because at that point you can't run and hide. You have to, face the questions that come. Let's see, just a tip here: avoid asking so many questions that the chat becomes stale. Perhaps you could ask 5 or so questions and follow that up with general questions like, how was your day? If they're good questions, not like what's your favorite food, your favorite color, or so on, then she's going to start talking more on her own. You'll feel more comfortable. You get more out of it. You can leave, cut it short, leave on a good note, and say, well, that was fun. I can't wait to do this again. How about tomorrow night, or something like that. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? A little introspection never hurt anyone. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? I like that question. Then, and it's not saying, getting back to those other 2 questions, how do you view yourself? Here you're asking, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? So it's not focusing on, what's so good about you or her. It's you tell me, in your opinion, what is there something you need to work on, and see how she says, because you want to be able to change the things that you need to change. Have you narrowed it down to one, or will you, Phil's Phoenix to Twit in the Philippines, have you narrowed it down to one, or will you be seeing more than one? I know others, they're going through the same difficulty of how to make that final choice. And especially if you've got, multiple people to choose from, it's tough. Any help we can give each other to make sure we're not going to regret the decision, the better. You could say, when was the last time you cried? I like this question because it can open up other ones. When was the last time that you cried? Do you think younger you would be happy with what you have become? Now, this one here, I think, might be just a little too intense, but you'll see it on the list. I decided to leave it on there. What is the best way I can be a supportive partner to you? What is the best way I can be a supportive partner to you? This is potentially another fairly intense question. You likely wouldn't ask someone unless you were engaged or about to be. I actually decided the best way for me to be supportive of my Filipina friend was that I've been dating for only a few weeks, was to ask her to marry me. You could ask her, what has been your greatest accomplishment in life so far? And she'll probably, take this and run with it, hopefully. Now, it's this question here, if she's not out of her 20s yet, she might not really think she's had any great accomplishments yet, but it's a fair question, and she might follow that up by talking about her dreams for the future. And of course, you want to believe that her dreams for the future are some that would include you and you could help her with. What has been the happiest moment of your life until now? What has been the happiest moment of your life up until now? I know mine was finally being able to marry my little woman from Davao City, Philippines. But happiest moment of your life, that question, depending on her answer, would maybe give some insight into whether she's, materialistic, what she values, where her heart is. She might say it's because I did something for someone and they really appreciated it, like I alluded to the other day. It's a good question. who doesn't want to talk about or think about happy moments? So I would ask that. You could say, are there things I say or do that make you want to spend less time with me? Now, this is a good question to ask before getting married, because if there's something you need to know, you want to know before getting married. So, are there things I say or do that make you want to spend less time with me? Well, that's an interesting way to phrase it. And if that's something you want to ask someday, then be ready. Hopefully, she says, well, I wish you would stop picking your nose so much. Okay, well, you can do that. That's a relief. James Jensen, can I request that your wife be on your lives with you so we could get her input also? Well, she's hard. The reason I have her in my promos is because I don't want people to think she's like Columbo's wife and you only hear about her, but you never see her. She is very, shy, I guess, private. Maybe that overshadows the shy part of her. I would love her to be here myself. I don't know if that's going to happen, James, but if you could, maybe suggest an idea on what the general topic would be, so that she's not uncomfortable, because, it's what I have to think about when I ask her to do things is what I know about her. I need to, frame questions and situations in ways that I know she won't feel uncomfortable with. And that's a good idea. I'd love to have her on here. Maybe someday she will. I would want to feel like I could say, hun, I'd like to do a live stream. I'd like to have you on here for a while, just for a little bit of time, see how it goes. If you like it, we can do it longer. Here's what it's going to be about, so that she feels absolutely comfortable. However, it's one thing to get my wife on camera to show it later if it looks good. It's another thing to do it live. So that's going to be the fly in the ointment there, I think, is being able to do it live. But yeah, that is a good idea. Could we have red flags in a Panay live stream after this one? Oh, red flags? You mean red flags that you see in a Filipina? That one would make a good one too. Well, I'm going to jot that down. I know it's come up before in my videos. Sometimes I get my ideas from videos because I'll pick out a part of it and say, well, I'd like to say more on that someday. So I know I've got one. If I have one, then I'll just release that. Okay. So there, I made a note. I want to have, say things that people need to know. Each person has different experience, so you might know the basic red flags, and somebody else may come up with one that you hadn't heard of before. You could ask, for what do you want to be remembered? For what do you want to be remembered? Now you're going to ask her to reveal to you the end result of her life, which is a good thing to think about. And for her to answer that question, she has to have some little stepping stones to get there. For what do you want to be remembered? I don't know. It could be an achievement, like something she accomplishes, like becomes a singer or a nurse or a lawyer, or it could be she says, reveals something about some difference she'd like to make in the world, how she'd like to help other people, as opposed to doing something to gain fortune and fame. So I like that question. You could ask, how can I make you feel more appreciated and honored? How can I make you feel more appreciated and honored? What do you think we can do to make our relationship stronger? Not an easy one, because you might not want to hear the answer. She might say something about your hair or beard or clothes or temper or something. She could just see it as you wanting to make the relationship better. What do you think we can do to make our relationship stronger? At some point, that should be asked before marriage or after. You could ask her, do you think we are all at the mercy of fate? Now, I know what I would want to hear if I asked her that question. You could ask her, when do you feel most loved? When do you feel most loved? That's a good one. If I could live your life for one day, what do you think would surprise me the most? If I could live your life for one day, what do you think would surprise me the most? I like this question. It could simply be asked, if I could live your life for one day, what would it be like? This question could be one that causes her to open up a bit. And good questions are the ones where you can get her talking, feeling relaxed, and at the same time, reveal information that you would need to know from her as somebody that is interested in possibly marrying her. How a guy cannot blow up with a Filipina from a Panay's perspective. Pardon this interruption while I write this down so I don't have to go look for it later. Okay. Just take a sip of coffee or something. Why not? You could be asking good questions. Things could be going along really good. You could be telling people, I think I met the one, and then do something and it just a big hole in the balloon or something like that. So yeah, I wrote that down and I appreciate that. Where was I? Oh, about the fate question. Yeah, I don't personally believe things are up to fate. I'd like to hear her answer that by, you can only control, you can't control everything, but you can control your attitude or your effort. And so, that's not necessarily by fate. That's what I would want to hear, or that's what I would tell her if she asked me. So just a few more pages here, some more serious questions to ask. You could ask her, how did your last relationship end? Fair question that she should be able to reply to. I told my wife all about my situation many years ago, and she talked to me about her life. I didn't ask her to. It just came out as part of a conversation we were having. Again, no, you shouldn't. Neither one of you should shy away, in my opinion, from any questions. How did your last relationship end? Shouldn't she know, and shouldn't you know both? Are you and your ex still friends? Are you and your ex still friends? If my wife had asked me that, I would have to say it had been so long ago, I wouldn't even know if they were still alive. That's sad. It's so long ago. How many sexual partners have you had? And I this is where I replied to James last time 2 weeks ago. If you were to ask how many sexual partners have you had, I would prefer this question be answered on the women's initiative somehow. Maybe there's a way to ask some questions discreetly or indirectly. I have to admit it, I would be shy to ask this, but I would want to know. If you are hesitant to ask this question, you might be able to get the answer by revealing your past sexual experiences and see if she follows suit. Otherwise, you could just ask her. If you are hesitant to reveal your past, I think you would be withholding information from her that she ought to know, and vice versa. If she's withholding something that you ought to know, then it just needs to come out, because I can guarantee you, if you're doing good premarital counseling, this sort of line of questioning is going to come out. So I'm quite okay with it. If she has no sexual past, she should be. If she has no sexual past, she should be proud of it. not ashamed, and if she has a sexual past, she should be willing to address the foreigner's concerns. And that works both ways. As a Christian, I believe in forgiveness. I was not a virgin when I married. If a woman took exception to that, I would understand. If this is something critical for someone, then they need to discuss it in detail. Would you be willing to go in for testing again before we got more involved? I just had the thought, better to ask this question from 8,000 miles away than sitting next to each other, with coffee or something. If I was asked this question, I would immediately say yes. If we had already talked about our pasts and I thought we were done talking about it, I might be a little miffed, but I would still say yes. Saying no would just make me look guilty, and passing the test would show her I don't have an STD. Yes, sensitive question, but fair. My hope would be that two adults would simply understand that this is something you would want to know. Not because she lives in another country where there is the stereotype that Filipinos are easy, plenty have morals, but because people are people. We are all sinners, and the sexual temptation is at the top of the list, I believe, for most men and women. If you would be hesitant to ask a question about her sexual past, could it be that you don't want her, to do the same? If you're not willing to talk to her about it, she's likely to move on. If she asks you, about your past, and you're not willing to talk about it, she is likely to move on, and you would likely do the same. When you show my pics to your best friends, what do they do? What do they really say? They probably would really say, believe it or not, guapo. That's what she tells you, and they'd probably tell her the same thing. And even if they said something like something that's not complimentary, I would think that the Filipinas probably just not going to tell you if that's what they thought. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what her friends are thinking. It's she's going to be the one making the decision. And the Filipina makes sacrifices too when she leaves everything and goes to see a foreigner and marry him. How would you handle it if you thought another woman was hitting on me? I guess I needed to change that question. Let's see here. Well, Filipinos are jealous. Probably everybody is to some extent. There may be a little higher degree of that there, but you can certainly talk about a jealousy, especially if you think other women will be hitting on you. How do you cope with stress? How do you cope with stress? And this is very similar to one we had when we began. And there are good things about a very long distance relationship, like not being able to afford wasting time since you can't spend much time together in person. But the flip side of that is not being able to see each other in stressful situations. Some of these questions are personal, but marriage is a very personal act, and you want to be able to know as much as you think you need to before getting married. And if she says she really doesn't get stressed, I am not sure I believe her. And if she hasn't, that might change once she's in America, where we tend to just have more stressful lives, it seems. What's my name after about a month of chatting? Well, if she doesn't know who she's talking to, then you can just cross another one off the list. That's for sure. You have found ones who forgot? Well, if you just had one or two conversations, but if you've been talking, like you said, a month of chatting, and you've chatted a handful of times, that's one thing. I remember there was a Filipina before I even met my wife online, And I had a long list. I wasn't chatting to all of them, but I had a long list. And one day I responded to a message, or I messaged her, and I called her by the wrong name. And she just laughed and she said, "No, I think you're, uh, you know, what?" She was very nice about it. Or no, she said, "I think I am not Susan," or something like that, laughing out loud. So, I apologized, and that was that. But I had never done a webcam with her. We never got around to that. Yeah, some people just don't use names very much. Um, my name's really easy to remember. Bob. Even her little 2-year-old niece now says Bob. So it's pretty easy for her. Another question you could ask is, do you have any bad habits I should know about? Any bad habits, you know, that I should know about? None of us are perfect. Good question to me. It's possible you might not even agree on what a bad habit is. You know, you just have to ask. What's the worst thing you've ever done? Is a question you could ask. You could say, have you ever broken the law? How would you handle it if you lost your job? Are you able to keep your anger under control? This is another area that on a very long distance relationship can be difficult to observe if you don't spend a lot of time together, unless you are retired and can spend ample time together. So that's a sensitive question. Are you able to keep your anger under control? Nobody wants to say, yeah, I lose my temper a lot. Or yeah, I like to break things, or I've done these things in the past. And again, you'd have to stress, just say, I don't like being with people when they're angry. I hope that you feel that we know each other well enough for me to ask you a question like this, but look, we all get angry at times. How do you keep your anger under control? And that's assuming that there is anger on her part, because we do get angry. You could ask her, do you like to travel, or would you rather stay at home? Finally, a lighter question. Do you like to travel, or would you rather stay at home? She probably doesn't travel as much as she'd like. How do you handle disagreements? Do you think men and women can just be platonic friends? Just more questions to learn more about how she thinks. Do you think it's okay for men and women who are in separate relationships to go have coffee or lunch together? You could ask, what is something you do which might cause me to question your loyalty? I'm not really sure what I think about this one, but I will respond to it. If I was asked this question and replied with, I like to spend a ton of time every week with my friends, or I am still good friends with my former girlfriend, she would have to determine how comfortable she would be with me. If she were to say that she is still chatting with other men just to be friendly, I don't think I would like that. As a Filipina, she might just be shy and doesn't know how to tell them to stop contacting her, or it could be that she will when she finally gets a marriage proposal. But yeah, that's a good one. What is something you do which might cause me to question your loyalty? It's gonna be a hard one to answer right then and there on the spot. Yeah, thanks for Twit in the Philippines. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for your input. Thanks for your help and your experiences. And hopefully we can do this again. And I appreciate everybody's comments here. I just have maybe 10 more before we wrap it up. I can stay a little bit longer. I think my wife will be home in about 15 minutes, and we got some roast upstairs to eat. What are some of your ideas for her to keep a relationship strong over time? Her answer would reveal who she likely will want to, what she will likely want to implement if you were married. Ideas she has for keeping a relationship strong over time. What do you think of my dream of becoming and then fill in your goal? Novelist, karaoke star, TV personality, athlete. And this is a good time to ask that, because if you succeed, that is what her husband will be doing, which would tell her something about her future lifestyle. Also, she might question whether your idea is a realistic one or not. Do you think it's okay for people to vent to other people about their significant others, or do you think that it's completely disrespectful and complaints should be kept within the relationship? And I think a Filipina would reply, that would be disrespectful, something to know ahead of time. You could ask, when you break up with someone, how do you do it? And maybe she hasn't been in a lot of relationships. For as beautiful as many Filipinas are, it surprises me how many have not had a serious boyfriend. What are your thoughts on marriage? I mean, it seems like a pointless question. Most people want to get married, I would think, but why not? And this question isn't specific about many aspects of marriage, so I think she would probably get straight to her point. What are your thoughts on marriage? You know, not on sharing of finances or sharing of roles. Different question there. What are your thoughts on marriage? What are your thoughts on divorce? And I think James asked this earlier, what do you consider cheating beside the obvious? And she might reveal a strict standard, you know. Are you comfortable talking about where our relationship is going? This is a good time, right in the intermediate stage. Are you comfortable talking about where our relationship is going? You don't want to waste, you know, a lot of time when you have to start over again with another prospect. You could ask, if one of my friends flirted with you, would you tell me? My wife would probably say that I don't have any friends, so you know, wouldn't happen. If one of your friends or family members told you to break up with me because he or she didn't like me, would you? A little question about loyalty there. How do you feel about my family and or friends? Was one of the questions offered. I'm not sure she would feel comfortable saying something bad, but I would want complete honesty if the relationship has been progressing. So there. How would you deal with a disagreement with one of my family members or friends? Good question, because if you're married, probably is going to be some of those. How much time do you think how much time do you think we should spend with our family friends outside of gatherings that require both of us to be there? I mean, initially she won't have a lot of friends, but that is a good question, because she may be, you know, like my wife, more of a homebody. And if she's more of a social butterfly, she might say, well, we're going to be, you know, doing a lot of things together, so you won't have time with your friends. But if you feel like, you know, I want to have a certain amount of space to do certain things, well, ask that, find out before you get married and it becomes a problem. So basically that's, you know, I'm just going to stop it right there. It's getting late. We've had a lot of excellent questions and comments left here tonight. So as you can see, there are many questions to ask when attempting to get to know the Filipina you've been communicating with better. In no way do I believe you have to ask 1,000 questions to gauge compatibility. Compatibility doesn't even guarantee a successful marriage. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know as much as you can, as long as you will be committed to this woman that you marry. They could lie, of course, but if you ask enough questions, then it will be harder to get away with a lie. If she does lie, then it is time to move on. I'm glad to say that my wife has always been consistent in her answers to me. She proved to me that she was worth the investment of marriage after I asked her if she would become my love beyond the sea. And we've been married since May 10th, 2015. So again, we got another a live stream coming up here. And some ideas. That one will be about tougher questions to ask even. And I took out a couple notes on some other potential ideas for topics. I appreciate that. So if anybody else has any comments, any response to the questions, now is the time to do it. If not, then I'll be eating dinner when my wife gets home. So for those of you that are maybe less engaging or just less comfortable asking questions, I think this series will be very helpful for you. because I believe you could have a lot of candidates, a lot of potential with a Filipina, and you can't take forever to know all of them because we're all kind of running out on some time here. And so you want to ask pertinent questions. You want to have a mix of serious and lighthearted questions, even if you've been together for a while. You can ask questions that are a little bit lighter still. Always good for one or two questions. If you've got those questions, James, let it rip, and I can stay on here with you. I did text my wife and told her I was going to do a live stream, so hopefully she won't come crashing down here. And I didn't have any more questions on my part, and we'll have. And again, I get these from sources on the internet, and I admit to not having any great guide of questions when I was asking, and I was kind of nervous. I kind of just decided to see how it go, and the basic stuff. How are you? And well, I like your profile, or this is what I like about your profile, and then quickly, in our case, it got pretty serious. I want to stay on a good side. Well, James, that's very astute of you. But no, if you've got a question waiting to come out, something that you don't want to wait, and you're just curious about, how I would reply to it, please go ahead and ask. I haven't heard the garage door open yet, and she'll have to warm up her car a little bit because it's cold out. So I probably have a good 10 minutes actually before she actually comes in. I've enjoyed this. I'm sure the most interaction I've had with you gentlemen, and other people can and will learn from this if they go to the live chat part. When this becomes archived, you click on live chat, and it will show all the questions that were asked during the live chat. If you just slide it over all the way to the end, you'll see all of the questions. If you just slide it over, let's say halfway through the video, then you'll get all of the questions that were asked during and comments made during the live stream up until that point. And I didn't even know this until a couple of weeks ago. So people can scroll way to the back and see all the questions and get an idea of what was talked about, and they can scroll back because it should have the time approximately that conversation took place. Good question from James Jensen. Can you cook? A lot of them don't. I'm serious. If I ask my Filipino can you cook? I mean, normally, yeah, like you say, I would expect, from what I know about Filipinas, that they can. Between you and me, I would prefer that they did, only because a Filipina that is taught to cook is also taught other things, like how to keep an organized house, maybe how to handle finances, how to be frugal, and maybe even how to be a good husband to a foreigner. Cooking is something you want. My mom is actually cooking for us tonight to give Isa a break, and it gives us three a chance to sit there together and spend some time together. Isa always likes it when I spend time with my mother. She thinks, here in the States, you guys don't spend time with your families, like she's used to in the Philippines. But I would ask her, can you cook? Certainly I can't. And if she can't, I don't know, I would prefer somebody that can. I take my wife's cooking for granted. She's an excellent cook. She can cook everything for the week in a couple days, and get it all packaged and organized, and then cleaned up, and the dishes clean, the whole kitchen clean. And then at work in the morning, all I have to do is open up the refrigerator, and I know exactly where she's got our Tupperwares and plasticware lined up. And sometimes, if it's confusing, she'll even tell me, Somehow she remembers first thing in the morning while she's still in bed. This is for you, and this is for me. These items are for me. These items are for you. So she takes that seriously. She takes it seriously. I know where it is in the refrigerator, so I can bring it to work. Cindy claims she couldn't cook, but she based her answer on her mother's ability. So Phil's Phoenix, your wife was thinking, now there's cooking like my wife or my mother does, but I can't cook to her level. Believe me, as you know, she's learned from her mother. And it's wonderful to have a wife who likes to cook. I just did a video on housekeeping, how important that is to certain Filipinas and how much appreciated that is by foreign husbands. A skill that seems to be waning, going out these days, cooking, cleaning. I mean, it's not easy to slave over the food and the cleaning, but if your wife enjoys this and she takes pride in making food that pleases her husband and having a house he enjoys coming home to, that's a relief to me. I was always worried I might marry somebody that's really messy. That would not be good. That would be very stressful. So I'm glad your wife is a good cook, because I think you're implying that she is. She just didn't know it at the time. So thanks to Phoenix. Thanks for being here along with everybody else tonight. Many of their answers will be based on their Filipino perspective. It can be a bit misleading when we are thinking it in American perspective. And that's true. I mean, that is true. There are some differences. Like we were talking about, what do you consider cheating? Well, she might say, if you and I went out on 2 or 3 dates, and then I saw you communicating with somebody else online, you're cheating with me. Or you were talking with somebody else, you're cheating on me. So, better to ask those questions, because the Filipino perspective could be different, could be a little misleading. Girls with hospitality degrees, rock, clothing store, mall gifts, not so much in the kitchen. Okay. Yeah, women in the Philippines can take classes on all kinds of things. My wife took one where she's at a hotel. They're teaching them all about, making beds and how to arrange things and put things. And there's probably classes on all kinds of things that would help a woman, Filipina, make an attractive wife. Material. Well, I'm thinking clothing store. You want to find out if she's material. Yes, a Filipina, even if she's poor and in a poor country, can still be materialistic, or have a materialistic, bent to her. And so, I don't want a materialistic wife. Rather than have her spend it on a bunch of stuff, I'd rather have her, help her family with it. Pentecostal motorcycle ministry. What's up? Yeah, they're all cheating, looking for the money. Well, they're not all cheating, because I'm sure there's people watching here tonight, and even have commented here, that would disagree with you. Their wives aren't cheating. They didn't cheat on them in the Philippines, and they're not going to cheat on them, where they live now. And no, that's beyond the stereotype. That's just simply not true. Filipina wants a good man. She's taking a big risk herself. She has a lot to offer, and not all Filipinas cheat, just like not all women in America cheat. So you have a right to your opinion, of course, but there are too many guys I know have come across that just don't know what that is, because their women have higher standards. The men looking for them had higher standards. The men looking for them asked the right questions, and made a good decision. We got married very quickly, but we did talk a lot, and I think we must have covered the things that were the most important to us as we continue to get to know each other to this day. So thank you all for being here. This has been kind of the intermediate stage of communicating with a Filipina online to get to know her better. You know some things about her. You know enough about her that you want to keep communicating with her. You're not sure you want to marry her, but there's some things you can ask to get to know her. And there's another one we'll do where we will get into more questions when you get down to the nitty-gritty. James is still here, and Terry is still here. So we had a good time tonight. A lot of good pertinent questions and comments regarding this whole process of getting to know a Filipina online. And I want to answer questions truthfully, like when we talked about the Filipina and money. It's just, you have to understand the culture you're in, and that will affect the woman, and her feeling ultimately an obligation to her parents, especially, to help financially. There's just not a thing you can do about that if you want her to be your wife. And just make sure she wants to be a good wife, and just realize that you have to see through the financial motivation for her to marry a foreigner, because that is there, and it needs to be accepted. And if you can accept it, you might as well just embrace it, so you're not arguing about that. A lot of girls in Angeles City, it's Angeles, I think my wife said, looking for husbands. Not always, Terry, not always. So I'm going to cut it off here. We've had a good night. My wife will be home soon. She's not out cheating with anybody, so I'm sure I'll hear that garage door any minute now, and we'll go up and eat. So then I can get this video uploaded, put some things in the description box. And adios, James. Appreciate you being here. I appreciate everybody being here. I appreciate everybody that will see this later and look at it and realize once again, love beyond the sea. I just want to share my experience. You don't have to agree with it. I'll share what works for us, what maybe I've learned from others, and hopefully that's what you'll come to expect. So I'm going to end this live stream until next time. Hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving holiday, and hope you have a good weekend coming up. Goodbye.